You know, in that moment of silence before we began, it's like, is that rain I'm hearing? I think it's just dripping from the leaves of the bay trees, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're also hearing the small birds are starting to chirp. And sometimes that kind of feels like, sounds like a drip too.
Oh.
But the birds are really coming around. And Obi, they're so anxious. They want the cold to kind of pull back a little because it's spring. Spring's coming. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're still zooming towards the equinox.
Yeah.
Here we are, Place and Purpose, Chapter 8.
Yes. Can you believe it?
I can't believe it.
I was just saying to Obi earlier, everybody, that if you look around here, when we started, everything was very dry, and the grass and all the native bulbs and things around the bays here are all coming up. Mm-hmm. And I said another month we'll have wade through very tall grass and flowers here. So.
Oh yeah, that'll be great. Well, it's great now. It's great to see this carpet.
Yeah.
You've got the spearmint coming in over here. You've got lots of chickweed over here too, and we just had a little what a sisterhood, really.
Sisterhood, yes.
Five fawns over here who were I think rather desperate to get at that chickweed across over the.
Oh my God! This is like they'd love to sneak in here.
Yes,
and I noticed yesterday for the first time, a female deer, her belly big. So, and that makes sense because they usually start having their fawns around the 1st of April here, early part of April. So they're already showing. So all these signs of spring, the flora and fauna.
The season of fertility.
Yeah.
So here we are. We've got a lot to talk about. Of course, I've got so much to talk to you about today. I feel so like pent up about it. You know, like oh gosh, I can't wait to talk to Greg about this, that, and the other thing. I don't know how we're gonna fit it all in today, but we'll try.
Well, we never fit it all in, so relax.
Okay, you're right. It is. It's a process. It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
It's a process, not a product. I am there for that. I think that we can start though with the thing that seems to be on everyone's mind. The transformation of California in the era of weather whiplash.
We're in the midst of it.
Yeah. Could we have? We could not have predicted it.
No, and we cannot predict the future. You know, we see all this rain, and it's marvelous. It's almost like a typical California winter that I remember as a kid. But what's happening is everything's more extreme. When I was a kid, you would have wet winters, but you'd have 3 or 4 days of rain, 4 or 5 days of sun, 3 or 4 days of rain, something like that. And then you'd have less rain and more sun as we progressed towards spring and summer. Here you have huge stretches of rain. And then you get these atmospheric rivers that we would get once every 6, 7, 8 years. So I sit here, Obi, and I look around, and of course, I don't want to think ahead, but I think this is wonderful. If the wetness and all of this will just kind of last. I worry now. I say to the gods, the spirits, I said, don't do a whiplash, and all of a sudden, after all this water, slap me with excessive heat for 2 months. But I'm not going to go there.
Right.
I'm going to. You know what this is teaching us?
Yeah.
I think. Which I've always said in a transformation of the way to think about the earth, and the earth will make us think about it, is that this makes us once again see that the winds, the sun, all of these things are spirit, and that we have to sing and pray to them and be humble before them because they got the power.
Okay. There was a lot there for sure.
Yeah.
The power. Well, we're going to talk specifically today about one traditional story that appears in your book, How a Mountain Was Made, with the 7 Bat brothers banishing the warm wind, which is also, among other things, an interesting meteorological account of the seasonality of local atmospheric events, including the Diablo winds from the east.
Yes.
In the autumn.
Yeah.
Here it is, still winter, still the time of storytelling traditionally. Yes. But we'll get to that in a second. Let's keep talking about the weather and how California is utterly transformed in its raiment. Yeah. To use even a metaphoric application of that word raiment, as if we have what is approaching statistically one of the biggest snow years
on record.
Yeah, on record, which is completely in line with predictive models towards what I call in my books climate breakdown by way of anthropogenic global warming, where you have this deformation of the historical trajectories of the atmospheric rivers across the eastern Pacific. And so by seeing more rain, and also, as you just alluded to, the horror of perhaps even seeing more aridity at the same time, right? More precipitation, more aridity within any sort of given calendrical period of time, the hummingbirds, the Anna's hummingbird, I can see it right there, right? That's the mating dance they're doing right now in March, right?
Very early.
They go up, and then dive.
Oh, it's amazing.
That's the mating dance. That's right. But yeah, here we are. It feels kind of like the first day of spring.
It does. That's what you come out here the last few days, even with the rain. As I told you at the beginning, these birds are just anxious to go. They're not even going to wait till it gets a little warmer. They're already diving and doing all this. But I want to jump back for a second to what you said about you used your more scientific terms for what's happening. And of course, absolutely right. But I hate to try to generalize or bottom line this, but is this not the earth, all the spirits, the winds, the water, tides shaking us up, whiplashing us with first a lot of rain, then a lot of heat, all these extremes? It's like they're shaking us. Wake up. Wake up. You can't continue this way. Wake up. And are we going to heed the wake-up call is the question. And how?
Or how we're going to heed it, right?
Yeah.
Are we in the process of waking up, or are we still dreaming? Here I am of European, before that Indo-European Asiatic descent. I am a 3,000-year-old dreaming Mesopotamian cultural figure, somehow. I still am. I embody that. I of course, I'm reaching poetically into this psychic sphere that you alluded to with spirits, right? I don't really know about spirits apart from some sort of religiosity, right? Which really gets me a little confused when we're not talking about ecology. That's why I'm so drawn to particularly Native California indigenous stories, indigenous cultural stories, because there is that ecological component.
Pileated woodpecker.
Oh, gosh, what a great...
I love them, the clowns of nature.
The clowns of nature. Oh, that's interesting.
Well, look at them. What do they? You know what they look like.
Okay. Well, I was thinking today about talking about coyote as a clown, but as far as like behaviorally, coyote takes on a very different role in your stories.
Yes.
But we can talk about that.
We'll
in a second
talk about that in a second. I interrupted you. Go ahead. I couldn't help.
Oh no, I was just going to bring about how in my own view, being for all intents and purposes an atheist.
Yeah.
Right. I don't need this mysterium tremendum outside of the realm of empiricism, outside of the realm of rationalism, also being two very different things. I don't need that. I don't see it, and I don't have it in my worldview. Now, I do acquiesce that the spirits, whether or not they exist outside of me, they can exist inside of me. Oh. And that's a type of existence, isn't it?
Exactly. First of all, you said a couple interesting things here. Yes, science is also a story. You say you're an atheist or you don't believe in, so-called the spirit world. but you do believe in something.
Mm.
That's a religion. Call it whatever. You're adhering to something.
Scientism.
Yeah, scientism.
Scientism, the duality of the world, that there are true things and they're all false things. When in fact it might be that truth, and this is where these stories and how a mountain was made are so very sophisticated in your book on coastal Miwok Southern Pomo stories. They're so sophisticated because they get to the ambiguity of truth itself, which I think is an emergent quality in this process of waking up.
And they live in that ambiguity.
Yeah.
They're not totally. We're not concerned with solving it.
We're not concerned with solving it.
Solving it. And, Westerners have a very difficult time with ambiguity.
Yes.
We want an answer. Is it yes or no? Or how exactly does it end? Did Cinderella marry the prince?
Is the drought over or not?
Is the drought over or not? Yeah. What's going to happen? So, we're very, what that seems to me to be so much about is an obsession with control. And we're never going to have control. Let me jump way back, though, a second.
Ooh, let's hold on to that, though.
Yeah.
We'll bookmark that.
Bookmark that. Yeah. Sorry there. You're getting me really excited, Obi. But you said something about your ancestry and Mesopotamia and all, where you come from. But all your ancestors, all of us, we're only here because we had an indigenous relationship with Earth for most of our history. So it's in you. Now, look at me. I've got American Indian, Filipino, and Jewish. I'm a mutt. And if all these things can get along in my blood, they can certainly get along right here. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. I'm a life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And my body is, of course, getting older, but it's worked it out. It worked it out at my birth. So, we can't think. We've got to be very careful never to think of a particular history or race or gender or sexual orientation as presupposing a point of view. We can be as dangerous or as wholesome as we decide to be.
It's like reality is, but reality is rarely what it appears to be.
It's elusive and moving. It's fluid.
Well, like race.
Yeah.
Race is completely sociological. There's nothing biological about it, except for the phenotypes, right?
The science. There you are. That's where science is really useful, because we start all these things about other people or other cultures or we project onto other phenotypes, as you say, but they mean not. The phenotype means nothing.
No. But it also means something. I mean, there's that
culturally in history, where you find yourself in history or culture.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to really examine, Obi. That's what we have to be.
Well, there's so much to examine. I'd like to get back to seasonality.
Yes.
Okay.
And the bookmark.
Well, the bookmark, but I want to go back to drought too, because I've been thinking a lot about this, because I've been wondering about how to answer this question, especially in this decades-long car crash that it seems like is the 21st century, as far as everything from the culture wars to climate breakdown, and there was quite a bit of bridging between the two, I think, ideologically, scientifically, spiritually. Now, drought. Are we still in the drought? We've got one of the biggest years of water ever in California. It's a miracle. And now, you said when you were a boy.
Yeah.
Now I'm a few decades younger than you, I think. Well, not quite a few. A couple.
Maybe a couple.
A couple. Well, I'm turning 50 this month. It's my birthday. I'll be down in the desert here.
Two.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember some of our biggest snow years were in the 80s and 90s too.
Yeah.
It keeps coming.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is a lot of panic. There's also a lot of historical amnesia as to what and how California rebounds. And I remember the great droughts of the 80s and 90s as well, when when I was exposed to this climate pattern in California. And
yeah, we did water rationing.
For sure we did. So I always in my mind have it that water is good. Now, that's hard to say to somebody whose house is flooding, perhaps even today, in the valley, say in the Great Central Valley, and I feel for them, even where like flooding is analogous to fire. You know, the other great climatic disaster that you know one encounters during one's residency here, destroying one's house. I feel for them. I feel for that, but the term that I believe would best apply, I guess what I'm getting at is drought is a very poor, anemic word to describe what is actually happening in California as it relates to the human ecology, right? Yeah. In some respects, the drought is over ecologically, on an annual basis. Yeah. This is a miracle year. What we are encountering in the human ecological world is, the society, I mean to say, is this idea of water debt, which I think is a much more apt description of what's going on. Our groundwater reserves are so low. And mind you, given these atmospheric rivers that are just dumping everything onto the Sierra Nevada, the majority of the Colorado River Basin that Los Angeles gets almost half of its water from.
More than half.
Right, right. It's just having an average year. It's a little bit below average, as a matter of fact. Yeah. So the Colorado River is not filling up, right? And California will get their allotages first because we are first in line, first in right, as the law of the river says. At least all of that is changing now too. There still just isn't a lot of river. There's not a lot of river there.
No.
Yeah, and so that combination of precipitously low groundwater and the Nile of the West, as they say, the Colorado River, continuing to be disastrously low, leads us on a policy level to think that California is indeed still in a drought, although that word is...
Well, it's interesting, Obi, because we don't even know what's going to happen with the snow. For instance, very scary, the atmospheric river that's coming tomorrow and Friday is warm.
Yeah, right.
And we're concerned about the snow, it melting the snow.
Right.
So we don't really know what's going to happen here.
Rain on snow.
Yeah, rain on snow. And as you pointed out, this is very typical of what can happen when you don't have localized water and people taking care of one another.
Ooh.
See, we have now the opposite of what is healthy. Localism lets you see and respond to what you're doing. The more you get separated from that culture of localism, let's say, I'm making up a term here.
Localism.
Localism.
Regionalism, localism.
Regionalism,
That works.
localism.
That works.
But remember, where you have 14, 15 million people in Southern California who have no idea most of whom probably don't know exactly the source of the water, it's coming from 1,000 miles away. Mm-hmm. It's been piped. We've done such a bizarre, miraculous, outrageous job of creating cities and things that are separate, and we move and have no sense of the water or the place. But to your point, no one will question where the water is until the Colorado River starts drying up. And they're going, wait a minute, that water's coming from 1,000 miles away? But nobody thought about that.
Yeah.
And the dams we build, indigenous people see immediately what happens with the fish and all of that sort of thing.
Of course.
But all of a sudden you're going to be without power. Then what? Yeah. And you're so dependent on pulling things from other places to feed you. Whereas again, we can't, I'm not going to romanticize here, but when you have an indigenous culture, it sees and is responsible for all that's going on that it can see. Mm-hmm. All right, in its landscape. Mm-hmm. It sees, you start messing up this water a little bit, or I start doing this, I see the effects. You don't see the effect when you're living in Los Angeles of damming and pulling all that water from other places. You don't see it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're not responsible. You're disconnected. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, gosh, Obi, what do we do about that?
Yeah. Well, looking to the old stories is a good place to start, especially when you're talking of systems of control.
Yeah.
Which really
that was the hook.
That was the hook. That's right. So this across the waterscape of California, this system that has been utterly transformed the way that California water moves around to such a degree that it might in fact have. And this is one of these completely unpredictable vectors that a bottleneck that we're encountering now, that we have in fact by extirpating biological agents such as the beaver.
Yeah,
we have exposed the system to a bit of rigidity, frailty, even that. Community members, I want to say, such more than human, non-human community members like the beaver, which were everywhere across California. There was something like 15 million beaver. There was a beaver or two per watercourse mile prior to Euro-American contact. Before the 1830s fur rush, when all those white men who got state parks named after them came through and just killed them and destroyed what was
made them all but extinct.
That's
in a very short period.
It was a vector of resiliency.
Yeah,
that. This is this process of waking up. If this episode today has a theme to it, I like that idea of coming into the spring, into the equinox. We are now, the days we're going to start getting longer, and we can enjoy this new season of waking up this summer.
Sprouting, budding green consciousness.
That's right. That's right. Well, as we consider today's story and how a mountain was made, which is 7 Bat brothers banish the warm wind. Yeah, right. Which is a story. I think it's the longest story in your book.
Yeah, it's one of. Yeah, I think so. I read it last night over.
Right. Well, it's a deceptively simple story about 7 Bat brothers who are described alternatively as hardworking,
handsome,
and then later shirking that responsibility, or actually kidnapping their mother-in-law
selfishly, so that their wives wouldn't take a week off and go with her to visit her relatives over the mountain.
That's right.
And once they did that, they liked the idea that having the wives all around, convenience. Same as moving that Colorado River water to Los Angeles. Convenience. There's a price to pay.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so now I have a little bit different take on it too.
Okay.
Now, I'd like to start off first by expressing something that's been on my mind, which is this idea of me reading these stories, and I have the opportunity here to be with the author, chairman of the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria, to talk about what it is for me to be consuming the cultural artifact that is the story, outside of its context, outside of its ritual, outside of any traditional way of its transmission.
Yes.
Right? In a book, in written form, in English, modern English, right? Like
textualization of the oral culture.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I've always been drawn to Native American stories, I mean, on Instagram, I'm Coyote Thunder, and that name comes from Barry Lopez's classic 1977 book, which is giving birth to thunder, sleeping with his daughter, how Coyote built North America.
Do you know where I met him, Barry? Interestingly, at Sundance, at the Writers Lab. We were there together, but anyway, go ahead.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I was working on Grand Avenue, and he was working on some cartoon thing.
Oh, in the 90s.
Yeah.
And you can see Grand Avenue on YouTube now. I recommend everybody go check that out.
It's on YouTube.
Grand Avenue was the mini-series that you produced in the 90s.
Yeah, I wrote the book and wrote the 3-hour episodes and executive produced it for HBO with Robert Redford.
Right. Did you get an Emmy for that?
No, we were nominated, but I didn't.
It's great. It's great.
Anyway, let's get...
Okay, so my problem, is there a problem with that? Am I, like, what?
Absolutely not. If I was concerned, I'm honored that you're attracted, that you're reading. And the reason I wrote this, again, textualized these stories and changed them in a lot of ways and made them readable, is I wanted a wide audience. If you know, whenever you write, and Obi, you do these beautiful books and drawings, which I can't draw a straight line, so I'm envious of you. But
thank you.
You know, anytime you're shall we say, arrogant enough to think that somebody wants to read something you wrote, I always have to ask myself, is it going to help? Can it do something? And what I'd like to do, if I'm successful, is convey a sense, however big or small, Obi, of this indigenosity, this sense of thinking about the world as alive and interconnected. That's all I want to do. And if I can extend that in some form or other to you, and if I can get you to think about... and all the stories have morals. They're all of all the things we need to do. They're ecological in nature, if you will.
Right. Oh, they certainly are.
And if I can extend that to you, that's to anybody. That's why I write. So you didn't know, but you just.
No,
you asked if it was. You asked if it was okay.
I appreciate that license, because I do. I do. You know, and this is something to consider, that these stories. You know, I see. I come to different conclusions when I read these stories, and I don't know if that's just my imagination, or if it's something else. You know, I mean,
there isn't a right or wrong answer.
I'm a student of cultural wisdom traditions across the globe, and I think that in North America we have something very special. These ecological characters that don't exist. And this is one of my big criticisms towards like a Judeo-Christian story, where you have angels and demons that don't have a worldly component by design, technically, right? You know, and I wonder about there is some ambiguity, like in behavior, like I'm thinking in a sort of a Blakean sense, or John Milton, say, you know, where you have like, where it's possible to be like a demonic angel, which is a terrible creature, tyrannical, or it's possible to be like a angelic demon, which, you know, is something to strive to be, to be in touch with one's shadow, you know, and to strive. And angelic demon would be like what you do as opposed to who you are, I suppose. So that, you know, that's a metaphor. But in this story in particular, you have the seven brothers looking for a wife. And who do they go to? They go to the whole village, which is portfolio of biodiversity, right? Yeah. From everybody's got an opinion. That's right. And that sort of calling in of the neighbors, of the communities, across this thing, where it seems to me, on a personality level, on a cosmomythic level too, you have no difference. And you say sacred time when animals were people. You have it's similar to race, right? All we have is just phenotypes separating us. You know, regardless of form.
And unfortunately, we work so hard to reinforce that separation.
Yes,
sadly
we do.
But Obi, one of the things I want to say, all in the stories, and as opposed to the Judeo-Christian tradition, where you have these dichotomies of good and bad, evil and all of that, and you're supposed to aspire to one, or if you want, the other. Here, all of the characters, Coyote is the most obvious, but all of the characters are simultaneously good and bad. They all have what we have as humans. They're good, and then greed or other things get a hold of them, and they forget. Excuse me. And so you have all of these animals, when they were people, acting like real people.
acting like real people.
Yeah, they're not aspiring to be angels. They're good. They want to do good. They know they're supposed to. They know rules. We're supposed to take care of the land. We're supposed to be generous.
Right.
We're supposed to be sensitive. But like all of us, all of the creatures, all of the characters in How a Mountain Was Made are, in some ways, simultaneously good and bad. They're like us.
Yeah, simultaneously good and bad. There's a redemptive quality that I think in this particular story is represented in the character of Old Man Mole.
Yeah.
Age is an interesting aspect to some of these creatures too.
Yeah.
Old Man Mole was married to Warm Wind, and just to point out the fact that the personhood of a quality like Warm Wind to call back this being, this agent, this quantum object, if you will, right? The warm wind, that is a being with a will of her own. She lives in a house next to an oak tree up on the top of the hill with near her grandfather, the sun. So Old Man Mole was married to her, but betrayed her.
Yes.
Early on, before the story begins.
Yeah.
And already been kicked out of the house.
Yeah, they'd had the 7 daughters together.
7 daughters, right.
And he betrayed her, and she kicked him out. There's a strong feminist line through this, if you see.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I see.
But anyway.
Well, I was thinking like what bats do.
Yeah.
You know, bats have a very important function. I mean, this is to the bat's defense. Right? This is a different reading of the story in that you describe them as hardworking at the beginning, and yet they can't take care of the. All of a sudden, 7 brothers and 7 sisters now in this house. They have all these kids running around, and the sisters want to go visit their mom for a week.
Yeah.
And they and the brothers are so upset by this because now they're going to have so much work because I think they still have to do their own job. And I think of like the witnessing of the land and the ecological function of bats themselves as being insectivorous. Right, and keeping insect populations down. That's what bats do. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And like so that they work very hard to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to take care of kids
all night long.
Right. Yeah. So there was some resentment buildup, I suppose. Yeah. Then they kidnapped their mother-in-law.
But there you go, though. They were tested, and they made the wrong choice.
Oh, I see.
They were tested, and remember, at the end, it's kind of wonderful because they're still going to be hardworking.
Yeah.
But they're also going to have to hang upside down so they can see their wives and all their children in the sky.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is such a funny conversation. We're like telling the story and analyzing it at the same time. And that's all right. Because Old Man Mole is the one who finally, still caring about his daughters, reveals that Warm Wind is kept in a cave. Yeah. And eventually they get back together.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful?
It is wonderful. Because I mean, there's that redemptive story,
and it is a redemptive story, and I love that part of it, if I may say so, because in their older age, they come back together. Mole has realized he was wrong. He does something, not expecting necessarily his wife who threw him out to forgive him, but she does, and they have what they not only are together and meet up once a year in spring and so forth, when, of course, Mole and Summer is coming up out of the ground, right?
Oh, I see. Yeah,
right?
Yeah, of course.
But they share the daughters, and they that's what they have together, and they're able to. She sees that he has good qualities. Yeah, he cheated. I mean, the fact is, nobody lives on this earth a saint. Not that I've met yet.
Right, but the retribution is a different quality to the community in these stories than appears in any other social type. As we talk about waking up to the source of the real treasure in this world, which is the binds that tie us.
Yes, yeah,
and gosh, and I think about the 21st century. I think about the mess of the Anthropocene. What's going to happen? What is 2070 going to look like? Well, you know, 1970 they couldn't imagine 2020. So you know, I mean, whatever predictions we have, they're going to be wrong. Which is, you know, because the truth exists in this ambiguity. Yeah. How do we map that out? Well, gosh, you know, trying to get this right. Did you see Bernie Sanders on Bill Maher the other night?
Yes, I did.
I was very disappointed.
Yeah.
With that at the end where he did the overtime thing. I guess this is an overtime when Bernie Sanders was unable to describe the difference between equity and equality.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders is unable to just, you know, he said, I don't know what the difference between equity and equality is. This is the policy of the Biden administration. This equity versus equality thing. Equity, very simply, is making sure that communities in need have what they need.
Right.
As opposed to equality, which is saying everybody needs the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
Like, and I didn't understand why we couldn't figure that out. I think it's important, especially in this conversation of ecology and conservation, to get this right, because this is a point that Greta Thunberg makes. Thunberg, to pronounce her name as she pronounces it, makes in her new book, the climate book, which is a really fascinating, if not long, read about democracy. If we don't tend to this stuff, to this idea of racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice, all these different kinds of justices, then we're going to slip towards totalitarianism as we are in the process of waking up, say.
Right, and there is, if you will, almost a global battle right now of totalitarianism versus democracy, and we're on which way is it going to fall? And you see what's going on in Israel, and you see how these, you know, different places, some of these great democracies are suddenly being challenged.
Yes.
And I think a lot of it, at the root of it, is fear and greed.
Control.
And we have to trust. We have to give up. Excuse me. I wish I had some water. I have some frog in my throat, but that's okay.
Suck on some grass.
Suck on some grass, yes. And anyway, yes, I could just go lick the grass. Look at how beautiful. But anyway, we talked about this a couple times before, Obi, that there will not be environmental justice until there's social justice. They're interrelated.
We should talk about it every episode.
Yes,
I think, you know,
they're inextricable from one another. Yeah. No, whatever solutions you come up with, the cheap way out is totalitarianism. That's the cheap, fast control way out.
Right.
I'll protect mine. I don't care if you starve. And everybody around me will do what I say, and that way you'll be healthy and happy, and then we'll have an enemy and we can stop them.
That's right.
We can't do that. We have to. I can't fix it, but in my life as a tribal leader, as a writer, I can work in my role and with my resources to do the best I can for everybody.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'll take it.
All right.
Are there any questions?
There are. Everybody wants to talk about water.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to talk about control and fear and irony and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But let's
Water's
talk
a
about
big
some
one. Water is the blood of this earth. It's the blood of life.
It's funny, you know.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jared. Our producer, Jared, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Sorry. We have a viewer question here that can kick things off, and thank you for these viewer questions. You can enter them into the chat, and we'll get them going. I've got a main line through one of our other producers here. She texts me the questions. I've got it right here. We got a viewer question: should these atmospheric rivers encourage us to consume more land with shallow, wide-spreading reservoirs? Should the needs of distant ag and urban areas force the drowning of Northern California grasslands? That is a very pointed question, I think, directly to the Sites Reservoir project.
Yes.
Which is what they call an Offcreek Reservoir.
Yeah.
That will be swallowing many many acres of water, many acres of grassland where a number of endangered species exist now. We're talking about butterflies. We're talking about invertebrates. We're talking about there's mammals and birds who are
many birds
nesting there too. There's lots of nesting habitat there.
That brings up everything we've been talking about, Obi. What are you going to do for convenience or survive? Are you going to destroy more for the purposes of survival, or we're going to take the short answers, unfortunately, because people will ultimately say, I need water or whatever, rather than transform ourselves. But we have to look at the consequences of what we do that. So if we flood those lands, we destroy more of what ultimately could or would take care of us.
That's interesting. Now, there's a reason why we're not building more reservoirs in general. There's two reasons. One is that there's not a lot of good sites left.
Right.
I mean, we have over 1,500 named dams in this state. Yeah. And the second is that dams of the type, you think Shasta Dam, you think of Oroville Dam, you think of any one of the dams across the ladder of rivers that go up and down the east-west flowing rivers down from the Sierra Nevada across the western slope. We've got very expensive projects that have a very limited return on the kind of water, as opposed to conservation measures. Now, conservation is a double-edged sword too. Conservation is not going to get us out of this problem. The more you conserve, it turns out, this is Gavins' rule, the more you conserve, the more you use.
Yeah.
That's why it didn't happen last year, but that's why tens of thousands of acres of almonds are being planted now in Westland's water district on the western side of the San Joaquin Valley, because with such advanced technologies, micro irrigation, we can put drops of water exactly where you need it. So you're using less water, but you're not.
No, right? You're not.
So it's just to get some economic background there. Yeah. So the people, though, who are the people, right? The people being 80% of our structural water is going towards agriculture now, which is agriculture in California amounts to about 3 to 5% of the total GDP of the state. And that's a miracle that's happened over the last 20 years, or 20, 30 years. 30 years ago, agriculture is about almost 50% of the GDP of the state. But now it's only 3%. And they're getting 80% of our structural water. That is a center that will not hold Joan Didion. That is something that we need to address. But of course, we're also, to your point about waking up, what are you doing with your lawn, man? 40% of urban water goes to lawns.
Well, and I was just down at UCLA during in the fall, and I drove around. I was going to various talks and homes and things there around UCLA. There wasn't one giant wealthy home down there that didn't have a huge lawn and beautiful green gardens in the middle of last fall, the worst point of the drought. And I'm thinking, where is the conservation? There's it comes back to this. We have to really look at sharing, sacrificing our desires to have more, sacrificing our desires to have a green lawn. We have to do some examination of what each one of us can do with wherever we are to consume less, but also to spread the word, to do this. We're in a very strange place. More than ever, we need to transform our lifestyle and how we think about who we are and where we are. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, the media, social media, is distracting the younger generations, all of us, and glamorizing wealth and power and all of these things that are antithetical to sharing, to transforming, to taking less. you know, I just recently, you know, had a little bit of a health scare with, you know, high blood pressure and stuff. The best you know, I don't need to be eating all this meat. It's not good. It's ecologically much more sound to move towards more of a plant-based diet. It's also nicer to the animals that are the way they're raised, you know. So I'm looking at that and going, God, Greg, that's kind of like an atmospheric river hitting you in the blood, you know, blood pressure. Change. It's telling you something. So I think it's really important to, each one of us has to sacrifice in some ways. We have to know that it's important to each one of us to do our part, however large, however small. And it's a wonderful thing to be reminded. Yeah, I mean, right. I just love sitting here talking to you, Obi, because more than ever, I'm listening to the birds all coming. I mean, we're so hearing spring. Here. It's gorgeous here. And often I run around here and worry about book deadlines. I worry about what's going on with the tribe, all this stuff. And the most important and beautiful things are free.
That's beautiful. Well, I love your process of what can be called sort of ecognosis, like consciousness of. That's a lawn. That is one trophic level up from a parking lot. Right. I mean, there's no biodiversity there. It's an incredibly simplified ecosystem. It's not an ecosystem at all. And it's just using water for an aesthetic that doesn't even look like California. I mean, there's this idea of sacrifice, but then there's this idea of like gain because of looking at how beautiful California landscape is, for example. You're not losing your lawn. You're gaining, you know, a resilient, drought-tolerant, pollinator-attracting habitat, you know.
And aboriginal, if you will, landscape.
The aboriginal landscape, that's right, that's right. So I think there's a way to spin it such that we aren't necessarily asking people to go with less, because with less you actually get more, right?
Right,
right.
You know, people always say to me, well, do you want to go back to the old ways? And I always say, no, I don't want to, you know, I'll be cold. I don't want to have to walk around and just be cold, or I like the comforts and the things I have. I don't want to go around it with, you know, bear skin or a rabbit skin thrown over me, and there's comfort.
It's an absurd question. What do you mean go back in a time machine?
Yeah,
like what? No, there is no going back.
There's no going back.
But what you have here, I would posit, is that in art, in humanities, in the humanities, and you and I as writers, by putting these stories out there, what you're doing, Greg, is you are reaching into the future to pull into the present these thoughts which have yet to form. Before they're locked down in apprehension, they exist in the future. Right? The future, what we're trying for is a different quality in a temporal space. We don't want to just repeat the past over and over again in the present and call it the future. That's not right. No, the future is different. So I believe that there's a future quality to what artists do. When looking at a good piece of art, you're actually looking at the future.
It becomes a seed of transformation.
Okay.
A seed of transformation.
I think that's apt.
Your books, Obi, help enable one to be. There's that. They agree with us. They agree with us.
Clown.
But you know, your books, the almanacs are amazing because with your drawings, it enables one to become conscious and be able to name things, life in an environment. The stories that I write are, again, also like seeds. They're like things to think, oh, new way of thinking or different way of thinking. And I don't expect you to read my book and become an Indian, you know, any more than a Latino.
That sounds impossible too.
A Mexican can. I mean, as I always say, what we become is relationships. You now have a relationship with this way of thinking. That's what you have. You know, people. I tell my students, they think, you know, they can adapt or absorb a culture. You know, you can take a person to a taco truck for 7 years, and they're not going to be a Mexican. They're going to be a person who's gone to a taco truck for 7 years.
Right.
And that will change them in certain ways, but they won't. But they won't be. They won't be the Mexican who brought the taco truck there, right? So we're in relationships, and what we're doing is dialoguing, and that dialoguing towards health, dialoguing towards health, and that's what we do in the present, imagining a great future.
Right. I think that's right. I think eating less factory beef, for example. We've got the thirsty for plants in the Ag Valley. You know, that we're talking about 80%. We're talking about transforming water industry and agricultural industry in California. What are we growing? Well, we're growing a lot of alfalfa. A lot of water goes to livestock feed. A quarter of it. A quarter of 80% of every raindrop we are able to capture
alfalfa goes to dairy cows. Dairy cows are standing on concrete and factory dairy.
If you're gonna eat meat, my rule of thumb is you should know the ranch. You should know something about their policy. You should know. You should, and that's possible, and that's why I live in a city.
Yeah,
because having a small footprint is very important to me, and that's what you just described.
Yes.
Right?
That's what I was the word the old term.
The old term.
Small footprint.
Small footprint. Yeah. I would like for my net contribution to my region, to my locality, to my community to be positive and not negative take.
And the goal here in my life, which I think we try, is I'd like to be able to give more than I take, but as long as I work towards it being equal, that I give as much as I take.
Here we have another solution, or this is from our audience, and again, thank you for the participation. We've got lots of discussion in the chat about whether pumping Mississippi River water west to the Colorado is a good solution or wasteful and fanciful prospect. There are engineers who know more about this than I do.
Yeah.
I think what the issue is, the real question behind the question, I'm always, as this whole podcast is about, is like, what is the question behind the question? What's the story behind the story? The question behind the question is, okay, so what is our approach? Is it going to be a technological approach? Is technology going to save us? The quote unquote like wizarding solution? Or is there like a prophetic aspect, which I believe you kind of lean towards, this idea of like, no, it's a lot of it's baked into the cake already, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, what we have is what we have.
Yeah.
And we need to adjust there accordingly, because the future is already here and it's coming fast. Climate change is already here. So I don't know. That's my general.
Well, it's interesting. We can start pumping and sucking the water from all over to continue the lifestyle we have, but there will be consequences, just as now we're facing the consequences with the Colorado River.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be consequences, and there will probably have to be necessary solutions that are technological in nature, and taking water, but everything that we do will have consequences. So if we are taking more and more water to sustain an unsustainable lifestyle, we're just going to continue to destroy and unbalance. So we can't keep doing that. I mean, desalinization was a great idea, but remember, it has consequences too.
There's an irony there.
Yeah.
An irony being some sort of second alternate face to the control coin, right?
Yeah.
Control irony, and this is what the great clown, the woodpecker, but also the great clown coyote. Well, actually, irony comes from the Greek word "iron," which is clown.
Yeah, clown.
Yeah. And that's so apt. And I think of like, how are we going to catch this roadrunner, Mr. Wile E. Coyote?
Yeah.
In a popular sense, that's exactly what we're talking about. Well, we're going to need a much bigger mousetrap.
Yeah. Or we're going to trick it. How do we trick it?
Yeah.
How do we trick the roadrunner? How do we trick it? And bigger mousetrap and all that. But the Roadrunner always gets away.
The Roadrunner always gets away. We're exporting 3 million acre-feet of almonds to China every year. Is this what we want to do with California water?
Yeah.
You know, how about we talk about those kind of solutions, policy solutions, democratic solutions, as opposed to, as you say, building a bigger mousetrap.
And right here in my own backyard, down the mountain, this beautiful farmland is what is being built on. All the suburban spread, all the growth is being built on the most fertile land. And they're just spreading this out. I mean, right here, there needs to be policy here to stop that kind of thing and find alternatives, i.e. building and refurbishing in town, in cities, rather than spreading out.
Yeah, getting rid of some of this asphalt, planting some gardens.
Yes, what we're doing is we're just spreading out the land that could feed us. We're blessed here with a climate and land that could feed us, and instead we're just building on top of it and importing food from everywhere else.
I'm with you, brother.
Change. That has to change.
I'm with you. It has to change.
I'm going to just a plug for the tribe. That's one of our goals, is to buy up a lot of land, turn it into organic farms to feed Sonoma County.
Ooh. Okay, well, we're running out of time this morning, but I think that we should really get into this in April, episode 9, when we start talking about land back. We're talking about food sovereignty. We're talking about localized solutions, especially in the time of April when we are planting the seeds.
We're planting the seeds.
We're planting the seeds. I think I want to shout out to the winner, the giveaway winner of our 2 books here. We've got The Forests of California and How a Mountain Was Made, one by Obi Kaufmann, myself, and one by Greg Sarris. And the winner, this is Paul Chappelle. Paul Chappelle.
Oh, Paul Chappelle. Hi, Uncle Paul. You were married to my Aunt Violet. I've known Paul. He's a wonderful man. He's Paul. Should I say your age? You're like 98 years old, and he's a wonderful human being, miraculous man. Paul, Uncle Paul, how are you?
That's great.
Yeah.
What a great way
and he knows all the Kashaya traditions. He was married to my aunt. He knew his mother-in-law was Essie Parrish. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
We're related.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
that's great. I'm so glad that Paul got the book.
Paul, I'm so happy.
Yeah. So just register at placeandpurpose.live. All the relatives.
Yeah, all my relations. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Greg, so much for a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
On.
I love this. We could go all afternoon.
I know. It's such a beautiful day. Yeah. All righty. Goodbye out there on the land of the internet.
Thank you for being here.
Indeed.
Yep.